The massive doors of the Galactic Council Chamber opened with a deep mechanical hum. Ambassador Jin Woo stepped inside with calm, measured confidence. His black diplomatic uniform was perfectly arranged, simple compared to the elaborate garments worn by many alien delegates, yet it carried the quiet authority of humanity. Behind him followed his small team of human representatives. Their faces were composed. Their eyes were observant. They knew they were entering one of the most important places in the galaxy. The chamber was enormous. Curved walls stretched upward into darkness, disappearing beyond sight. The central floor was surrounded by thousands of seats, each filled with beings from distant worlds, a living ocean of alien civilizations. Jin Woo had walked these halls many times before. He knew the representatives, the tall, elegant Kaths, with their blue skin and proud expressions. The Zaperians, beings made of crystal who shimmered like living diamonds under the chamber lights. The insect-like members of the Hive Collective, their countless eyes watching every movement with perfect attention, and dozens of other species, ancient civilizations, powerful empires, races that had traveled between stars long before humanity had ever looked beyond its own moon. In nearly every traditional measure, they were greater than humans, older, stronger, more advanced. But Jin Woo had learned something during his years as a diplomat. The age of a civilization did not determine its worth. Beside him walked Sora, his young assistant, carrying a recording device close to her chest. She tried to appear confident, but Jin Woo noticed the slight tension in her movements. It was her first time inside the council chamber, and he understood why she was nervous. Every decision made here could affect billions of lives. 300 years of galactic history lived within these walls. Wars had ended here. Alliances had been created here. Entire civilizations had risen or fallen because of conversations in this room. But Jin Woo felt no fear. He did not come here to prove humanity was powerful. He did not come here to challenge the ancient races. He came with one purpose, to speak for Earth. And no matter how many eyes watched him, no matter how many civilizations judged him, he would do his duty. Prime Villar of the Cathiran Empire stood at the center of the chamber. His people had ruled space lanes for over 2,000 years. His voice carried the authority of countless generations when he spoke. Ambassador Jin Woo of Earth, Villar began, his words echoing through the chamber. We have called this session to address a growing concern about your species. Jin Woo stopped in the designated speaking area. He placed his hands behind his back and waited. Around the chamber, alien voices whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music, grinding metal or rushing water. For 3 centuries, Villar continued, this council has maintained peace through careful discussion and fair compromise. Every species has found their place in our great community. Every species except one. The whispers grew louder. Jin Woo knew what was coming. His government had prepared him for this moment. Humanity, Villar said, his voice growing harder, refuses to follow the established order. Your people expand into new systems without asking permission. You build military ships without reporting their numbers to us. You fight pirates and raiders with methods that disturb the peace of space. A delegate from the Aquarian Federation stood up. His wet green skin glistened under the chamber lights. The humans destroyed an entire pirate fleet last month, he said. They showed no mercy. They took no prisoners. This is not how civilized beings conduct warfare. More voices joined in. A Zaperian representative sparkled brighter as she spoke. Their expansion threatens established trade routes. They build colonies without asking which species already claim those regions. They ignore our communication protocols, added a member of the Hive Collective, its mandibles clicking. They act like they need no one's permission for anything. Jin Woo listened to it all. He had heard these complaints before in smaller meetings and private talks. Now they were making it official. Prime Veltar raised his hand for silence. The chamber grew quiet, thousands of beings waiting for his next words. Therefore, Falar announced, this council has reached a decision. Humanity must cease all expansion beyond your home system immediately. You will surrender your military fleet to council peacekeepers. You will submit to protective oversight to ensure you learn proper galactic citizenship. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval, clicking, humming, whistling, and other noises that meant agreement in dozens of different species. Xian Wu stood perfectly still, his face showing nothing. This is for the good of all, Belthar continued once the noise died down. Your species is young. You need guidance to find your proper place in our community. The older races have much wisdom to share. You have 72 hours to respond, added General Theix of the Aquarian military. We hope you will see the wisdom of accepting our generous offer. Velar looked down at Jin Wu. What is humanity's answer to the council's decision? Jin Wu had practiced this moment many times. He had discussed it with Earth's leaders, with military commanders, with ordinary citizens. The answer had been the same from everyone. No, Jin Wu said. The single word hit the chamber like a physical blow. Silence fell so completely that the hum of the station's air systems became loud. Thousands of alien beings stared at the small human figure standing alone on the speaking floor. I'm sorry, Beltar said, clearly confused. Did you say no? Yes, Jin Wu replied. I said no. The silence stretched longer. So Minstay stepped closer to her ambassador, her recording device capturing every second of this historic moment. You refuse our generous offer, asked the Zephyran delegate, her crystal body dimming with shock. We didn't ask for your offer, Jin Wu said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We didn't ask to be part of your council. We didn't ask for your guidance or your protection. Prime Velar's blue face darkened. Every species must find their place in the galactic order. This has been true for thousands of years, has it? Jin Wu asked. Or have you simply never met a species that said no before? The chamber began to buzz with confused voices. Representatives of ancient civilizations whispered frantically to each other. This had never happened before. In 3 centuries of council rule, no species had simply refused their authority. You cannot exist alone in space, said General. No single species can stand against the combined might of the galaxy. Jin Wu turned to face the general. We're not asking to stand against anyone. We're asking to be left alone to live as we choose. That's impossible, Beltar declared. Order must be maintained. Rules must be followed. By whose authority? Jin Wu asked. When did humanity agree to follow your rules? When did we sign your treaties? When did we ask to join your council? The questions hit the chamber like bomb blasts. For the first time in anyone's memory, someone was questioning the basic foundation of galactic government. Jin Wu looked around the vast chamber, meeting the eyes of creatures that had ruled space since before his species had learned to fly. We didn't ask permission to exist, he said finally, and we won't ask permission to thrive. He turned and walked toward the exit, his small team following. Behind them, the chamber exploded into chaos as thousands of beings tried to understand what had just happened. As the doors closed behind them, So Min looked at her ambassador with wide eyes. What happens now? She asked. Jin Wu smiled grimly. Now we find out if they as committed to their rules as they claim to be. General The stood in the war room of Nexus Prime, staring at the holographic display that showed humanity's pathetic military strength. The numbers glowed in soft blue light, and they told a simple story. Humans had exactly 237 warships scattered across 12 star systems. The Galactic Council commanded over 50,000 vessels from 47 different species. It's not even a contest, said War Commander Zix of the Saran Empire. The massive reptilian being gestured at the display with one clawed hand. My people alone could crush them with a single battle fleet. Admiral C of the Zepyrian Defense Force sparkled in agreement. Their largest ship is smaller than our escort frigates. Their weapons are primitive kinetic cannons and basic energy beams. They have no shields worth mentioning. General Thex nodded, but something bothered him about the human response. In his long military career, He had seen many species surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. He had seen others fight hopeless battles for honor or religious reasons. But he had never seen a species so calmly refuse superior force without any apparent plan for survival. What do we know about their military doctrine? He asked his intelligence officer. Lieutenant Pex, a young Aquarian with bright green scales, pulled up another display. Very little, sir. They keep their military information heavily classified. What we do know comes from their conflicts with pirate groups in the Outer Rim. And what does that tell us? They fight dirty, sir. No formal battle lines, no rules of engagement, no mercy for defeated enemies. When they encounter pirates, they don't try to capture ships or take prisoners. They simply destroy everything. War Commander Zix laughed a sound like grinding stone. Primitive barbarians. They'll learn proper warfare when we teach them. But General frowned. Show me the battle recordings from their pirate encounters. The holo display shifted to show grainy footage of human ships fighting a pirate fleet near the Kepler system. They watched carefully as human vessels moved in patterns that made no tactical sense. They broke formation constantly, ignored traditional attack vectors, and used their own damaged ships as weapons by ramming them into pirate vessels. Madness, whispered Admiral CS. They sacrifice their own ships like toys or like tools, they said quietly. Computer, analyze human casualty rates in these encounters. The data appeared instantly. In 12 recorded battles with pirate fleets, human forces had achieved complete victory while suffering less than 8% casualties. The pirates had been wiped out to the last ship. How? Thex asked. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Dong Hyun sat in his office deep beneath the surface of the planet. The walls were covered with star charts and tactical displays showing the positions of every Council fleet in known space. He looked older than his 60 years, his face lined with the scars of humanity's earlier wars. Dr. Yunji entered the office carrying a thick data pad. She was younger than the Admiral, but her reputation as a strategic genius had earned her respect throughout the human military. The Council issued their final warning, she reported. 30 standard days to comply with their demands, or they'll send a police fleet to force our surrender. Dong-hyun nodded. Which fleet? The 3rd Expeditionary Force. 1,200 ships under War Commander Zix. They plan to make an example of our colony at New Bususan. 1,200 ships. The Admiral repeated against our 40 vessels in that sector? 37 combat ready, Yunji corrected. But that's assuming they fight the kind of war the Council expects. Dong-hyun smiled grimly, which they won't. The two humans had spent decades studying how the galaxy's older species conducted warfare. It was like watching an elaborate dance. Fleets would meet in open space, exchange formal challenges, then fight according to rules that had been established over thousands of years. Battles lasted for days or weeks, with careful attention paid to minimizing casualties and preserving valuable ships. They think war is a chess game, Yunji said. Move pieces around the board, capture territory, negotiate when losses become too expensive. And we think war is survival, Dong-hyun replied. Win or die. The Admiral stood and walked to a large display showing the entire human sphere of influence. 12 star systems, 34 colonies, and barely 100 million people scattered across space. By galactic standards, humans were insects. What did you learn from the pirate encounters? He asked. Yunji pulled up her analysis. Council species fight like they've been fighting for centuries. They expect enemies to follow the same rules they do. They build big ships with heavy armor because they expect long battles with multiple engagements. They take prisoners because they expect to negotiate later. They preserve their own forces because ships are expensive and trained crews take decades to replace. And pirates fight like humans. Dong-hyun said. Exactly. No rules, no mercy, no concern for anything except winning. That's why human forces perform so well against them. We understand desperation warfare. The Admiral turned to face his strategic advisor. Can we win against the Council? Yunji was quiet for a long moment. Not in the kind of war they want to fight. If they force us into traditional fleet battles in open space, they'll crush us through sheer numbers. But they've been fighting the same way for so long that they've forgotten there are other ways to wage war. They think in terms of honorable combat between equal civilizations. They've never faced an enemy that treats survival as the only rule. On the colony world of New Sol, Captain Minho received his orders with calm acceptance. He commanded the light cruiser in one of only 6 human warships in the system. His mission was simple: evacuate all civilian populations to prepared shelters, then prepare for what Earth Command was calling Demonstration Alpha. His communications officer, Lieutenant Eugene, looked worried as she read the tactical briefings. "Sir, Council forces will outnumber us 300 to 1. How are we supposed to demonstrate anything except how quickly they can destroy us?" Minho smiled. "We're not going to fight them, Lieutenant. We're going to teach them." Teach them what? That they don't understand humans as well as they think they do. Across human space, similar preparations were taking place. Admiral Bay commanded the Mobile Defense Fleet, 12 fast ships that could strike quickly and disappear before enemy forces could respond. Captain Nari led the reconnaissance squadrons, small vessels packed with sensors and stealth technology. Commander Jiun trained the assault wings, fighters designed for one purpose: to get close to enemy ships and cause maximum damage. None of them expected to survive what was coming, but all of them understood their mission. The Council believed humans would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. They believed this because every other species had eventually surrendered. They had built their entire system of government on the idea that rational beings would always choose survival over destruction. They had never encountered humans during the resource wars, when entire cities had fought to the last bullet rather than surrender. They had never seen human colonists hold off pirate fleets with mining equipment and cargo haulers. They had never learned that humans considered freedom worth any price. In 30 days they would begin to learn. Generals finished reviewing the human military data and made his recommendation to the Council. "A single battle group should be sufficient," he reported. "Minimal resistance expected. We'll be home in time for the Harvest Festival." War Commander Zix agreed enthusiastically. "My ships could use the exercise. It's been too long since we've had proper combat training." Neither of them noticed the small detail in the intelligence reports. In every encounter with pirates, human casualties had been exactly 8%, not approximately 8%, exactly 8%, as if humans calculated acceptable losses ahead of time and planned accordingly, as if they knew something the Council didn't. The Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the new Bususan system. Like a moving mountain of metal and energy, 1,200 ships in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the authority of galactic law. War Commander Zix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought Sovereign Blade, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. "Scan for human vessels," he ordered his tactical officer. "Sir, I'm detecting minimal activity. Most of the system appears to be evacuated. Only one ship showing active signatures." Zix nodded. The humans were being smart, getting their civilians out of the way before the inevitable surrender. "What type of vessel?" "Light cruiser, sir. Designation: Incheon. It's holding position near the inner asteroid belt." "Hail them," Zix commanded. The main display flickered and showed the bridge of the human ship. Captain Minho sat calmly in his command chair, wearing a simple blue uniform. Behind him, Zix could see a small crew working at their stations with quiet efficiency. "Captain Minho of the Earth vessel Incheon," Zix announced, his voice carrying the weight of imperial authority. "I am War Commander Zix of the Galactic Council Fleet. You are ordered to surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded." Minho looked directly at the screen. "War Commander Zix, I have coordinates for you." A data packet appeared on Zix's tactical display. The coordinates pointed to an unremarkable asteroid field in the outer system. "What are these coordinates for?" Zix demanded. "If you want to arrest humans for the crime of existing," Minho replied, his voice steady, "come and take us." The transmission ended. Zix stared at the blank screen, his reptilian features twisted with anger. In all his years of military service, no one had ever spoken to him with such casual disrespect. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the human vessel is moving toward the coordinates they provided. Should we pursue?" "Of course we pursue," Zix roared. "SS signal the fleet. All ships advance on those coordinates. Let's finish this farce. The massive Council fleet began to move. 1,200 vessels following a single small human ship toward what looked like an empty asteroid field. On the bridge of the Sovereign Blade, officers checked their weapons and prepared for what they expected to be a very short battle. 3 hours later, the Council fleet arrived at the coordinates. The asteroid field stretched for millions of kilometers, in all directions, chunks of rock and metal debris floating in lazy orbits around each other. It looked exactly like 1,000 other asteroid fields scattered across the galaxy. "Where are they?" Zix asked his sensor operator. "I'm detecting the human cruiser, sir." "It's just sitting there. No movement, no power signatures except life support." "Any other vessels?" "Negative, sir. Just rocks and debris." Zix felt a growing sense of unease. Something was wrong. No military commander, no matter how desperate, would lead an enemy fleet to an empty asteroid field unless they had a reason. "Full sensor sweep," he ordered. "Find me those human ships." The sensors reached out, probing every asteroid, every piece of debris. The results came back negative, just rocks and metal, nothing more. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." Captain Minho appeared on screen again. This time he was smiling. "War Commander Zix," he said politely, "welcome to the Kepler system. I hope you enjoy your stay." "Surrender now," Zix demanded. "You're outnumbered 1,200 to 1. "Actually," Minho replied, checking something off-screen. "You're outnumbered about 3-1. You just don't know it yet. That's impossible. Our sensors show nothing but rocks." Minho's smile widened. "Our sensors are better than yours." The transmission ended. Zix was about to order his ships to open fire when his tactical officer suddenly screamed. "Massive energy signatures all around us. The asteroids they're not asteroids." The rocks began to unfold. What the Council fleet had mistaken for natural debris were camouflaged weapons platforms built over decades by human engineers and hidden throughout the asteroid field. Hundreds of them, their surfaces designed to mimic rock and metal while concealing fusion reactors and kinetic cannons. The first salvo hit the Council fleet before they could react. Streams of accelerated metal tore through ships designed for traditional energy-based combat. The elegant shields that protected against plasma beams and particle weapons were useless against solid projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. 27 Council ships vanished in the first 10 seconds. "Evasive action," Zix screamed. "Return fire." But the Council fleet was trapped in the middle of the asteroid field, hemmed in on all sides by weapons they couldn't see until they fired. And the humans weren't fighting like any enemy the Council had ever faced. Commander Ji Hune led his fighter squadrons out of hidden bays carved into the largest asteroids. His ships were tiny compared to Council vessels, but they moved like angry insects, swarming over the massive enemy fleet and attacking wherever they found weakness. "Target their sensor arrays." Jiun ordered his pilots. "Blind them first." The human fighters didn't try to destroy Council ships outright. Instead, they crippled their ability to fight back. Sensor clusters, communication antennas, weapon targeting systems, everything that made a warship effective in battle. Captain Nari emerged from the shadow of a gas giant with her stealth squadron. 6 ships designed to be invisible to enemy sensors. They struck at the Council fleet command vessels, using their advanced targeting systems to eliminate flag officers and disrupt the chain of command. War Commander Zix watched his perfect formation dissolve into chaos. Ships collided with each other as they tried to escape the asteroid field. Others fired wildly at targets they couldn't properly identify, sometimes hitting their own allies. "How many enemy vessels?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. They keep appearing and disappearing. Our sensors can't get a solid count." The truth was that humans had less than 400 ships hidden throughout the asteroid field. But they were fighting a kind of warfare the Council had never seen. No formal battle lines, no rules of engagement, no concern for anything except destroying the enemy as quickly as possible. Admiral Bay watched the battle from his command ship hidden behind a moon. His mobile fleet was ready to strike if the Council tried to retreat, but so far that wasn't necessary. The trap was working perfectly. "Status report," he requested. Council fleet is down to about 800 effective vessels, his tactical officer reported. They're trying to regroup, but the asteroid field is making formation flying impossible. And our losses, 14 platforms destroyed, 6 fighters lost. Well, within acceptable parameters. Acceptable parameters. That was the difference between human and Council warfare. The Council tried to minimize losses because every ship represented decades of investment in training. Humans calculated losses as part of the mission and planned accordingly. War Commander Zix realized he was facing annihilation unless he acted quickly. Signal general retreat, he ordered. All ships emergency hyperspace jump. But as Council vessels began to power up their jump drives, they discovered another human surprise. The asteroid field was filled with hyperspace inhibitors, devices that prevented ships from entering faster than light travel. They were trapped. Captain Minho's cruiser finally moved, sliding between the larger Council ships like a shark among whales. His voice came over the emergency frequencies. "War Commander Zix," he said calmly, "are you ready to negotiate now?" Zix looked at his tactical display. Half his fleet was gone. The survivors were scattered, damaged, and trapped in a killing field designed by an enemy he had completely underestimated. "What do you want?" he asked. "For you to leave," Minho replied. "Take your remaining ships and go back to the Council. Tell them what you learned here, and if I refuse, then you'll learn why humans don't take prisoners." The Council fleet limped away from the Kepler system 6 hours later. Of the 12,200 ships that had entered the asteroid field, fewer than 400 made it out. The survivors carried word back to Nexus Prime that would change everything. Humans, it seemed, had their own ideas about how wars should be fought, and they were very, very good at it. News of the Battle of Kepler spread through the galaxy faster than the Council could stop it. On frontier worlds and trading stations, in deep space mining operations and remote colonies, beings who had never questioned Council authority suddenly found themselves asking dangerous questions. Ambassador Tae Young sat in her small office on the border world of Haven's Rest, watching her communication system light up with incoming messages. Representatives from dozens of species wanted to know the same thing. How had humans accomplished the impossible, irradiating with another batch of encrypted transmissions? "We're getting requests for meetings from the Mineral Confederacy, the Outer Rim Alliance, and even some of the younger Council member species." Tae Young nodded, reading through the messages. Each one asked variations of the same question. Was it really possible to say no to the Council and survive? On Nexus Prime, the great chamber that had maintained order for 3 centuries was in chaos. Prime Velthar stood at the center podium, his blue face dark with anger and frustration, trying to maintain control over a session that had already spiraled beyond his authority. "The humans must be stopped," declared Admiral CS of the Zepyrian Defense Force. Her crystal body pulsed with angry red light. "They've made a mockery of galactic law." But other voices rose in opposition. Delegate Kree, of the Mineral Worlds, a silicon-based being whose people had been treated as second-class citizens for generations, stood to address the chamber. "Galactic law?" Kree asked, his rocky voice echoing. "What law says the Council can attack a species that never agreed to join us? What law says we can demand submission from beings who ask only to be left alone?" The chamber erupted in arguments. Species that had never dared speak against Council policy suddenly found their voices. Representative flux of the energy beings shimmered as he spoke. "For centuries we have been told that Council membership is voluntary, but when humans choose not to join, we attack them. How is this voluntary?" War Commander Zix recently returned from his humiliating defeat, slammed his clawed fist on his speaking platform. "They destroyed 800 of our ships. This cannot be allowed to stand." "Why not?" asked Delegate Kree. "You attacked them first. They defended themselves. By what right do we demand they should have surrendered?" Prime Velar called for order, but the damage was done. For the first time in Council history, member species were openly questioning the basic foundations of their government. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Yunji was putting the finishing touches on what would become known as the Sovereignty Doctrine. The document was simple, only 12 pages long, but it contained ideas that would reshape galactic politics. The right of free beings to govern themselves, she read aloud to Admiral Dong Hyun, cannot be subject to the approval of others, no matter how ancient or powerful those others might be. It sounds so reasonable when you put it that way, Dong Hyun said. I wonder why it took so long for someone to write it down. Because reasonable ideas can be dangerous, Yoonji replied, especially to people who benefit from unreasonable systems. Thus, sovereignty doctrine was translated into 47 languages and transmitted throughout the galaxy via hidden networks that the Council couldn't monitor on worlds where beings had accepted Council rule because they saw no alternative. The document spread like wildfire. The Council's response was swift and predictable. They assembled another fleet, this one even larger than the first. But as Admiral Thex prepared his forces, he discovered a problem he hadn't anticipated. Sir, his logistics officer reported, we're having difficulty with supply lines. Several of our fuel depots have gone offline. Equipment failure? Thex asked. Unknown, sir. The station simply stopped responding to our communications. What Thex didn't know was that Admiral Bay had launched humanity's second phase of operations. Instead of waiting for the Council to attack human worlds, human forces were striking at the infrastructure that kept the galactic government functioning. Captain Nari's stealth squadrons hit communication relays throughout Council space. Her ships would appear from nowhere, destroy their targets, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. The attacks weren't random. They followed a careful plan designed by Dr. Yoonji to maximize disruption while minimizing civilian casualties. Target the bureaucracy had been her instruction. Make it impossible for them to coordinate their response. Commander Eugene led engineering teams that sabotaged fuel depots and supply stations. They didn't destroy the facilities that would have harmed civilian populations. Instead, they introduced subtle system failures that would take weeks to repair. The effect was devastating. The Council's vast military machine had been built assuming that their enemies would fight traditional battles in predictable locations. They had no defense against an enemy that struck everywhere and nowhere, targeting the boring but essential systems that kept their empire running. On the frontier world of New Harmony, beings watched in amazement as a Council garrison simply packed up and left. Without fuel for their ships and spare parts for their equipment, the peacekeeping force had become an expensive liability. They're just gone, said Mining Chief Rock, a heavily built humanoid whose people had been under Council oversight for 2 centuries. After all these years, they're just gone. His assistant, a young female named Vera, looked at the empty garrison buildings. What do we do now? Whatever we want, I suppose, Rock replied. For the first time in my life, whatever we want. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds as Council forces retreated to protect essential facilities. Entire systems found themselves suddenly free from oversight they had never requested. Ambassador Tae Young found herself at the center of a growing movement. Representatives from 17 different species had declared their independence from Council authority and were looking to humanity for leadership. We don't want to rule you, she explained to a gathering of newly independent delegates. We just want to show you that ruling yourselves is possible. The Free Systems Alliance was born from those meetings. It wasn't an empire or a federation in the traditional sense. It was simply a group of species that had agreed to the radical idea that free beings didn't need anyone's permission to exist. Back on Nexus Prime, Prime Villar faced the greatest crisis in Council history. Member species were withdrawing from joint operations. Trade agreements were being cancelled. The ancient authority structure that had governed the galaxy was crumbling. We must make the humans pay, declared War Commander Zix. Show the galaxy that rebellion has consequences. But Delegate Creed disagreed. The humans have shown us something we forgot. He said that strength comes from those who choose to stand together, not from those who are forced to kneel. Admiral Cost pulsed with frustrated energy. If we allow this rebellion to succeed, every species in the galaxy will think they can ignore our authority. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, said Representative Flux. Maybe it's time to ask why our authority should matter more than their freedom. The debate raged for days. Ancient species that had ruled space lanes for millennia found themselves questioned by younger races they had considered children. The Catherine Empire's carefully maintained hierarchy began to crack as beings who had never dared speak truth to power suddenly found their voices. Prime Villar called for a vote on military action against the human alliance. For the first time in Council history, the motion failed. Nearly half the member species either voted against it or abstained, leaving the hardliners without the authority they needed. As news of the vote spread, more systems declared independence. The Free Systems Alliance grew from 17 species to 31 to 46. Each new member brought their own traditions, their own technologies, their own ideas about how free beings should organize themselves. Dr. Yunji watched the reports from her office on Earth, amazed at what humanity's simple no had unleashed. "Did you expect this?" Admiral Donghun asked. "I hoped for it," she replied. "But I never dared expect it. Who would have thought that so many beings were just waiting for someone to show them they had a choice?" The galaxy was changing. Ancient power structures built on the assumption that age equaled wisdom were being challenged by younger species who valued freedom over stability. And at the center of it all, humanity had become something they had never intended to be, the symbol of resistance to authority that couldn't justify itself. The Council still existed, still commanded vast fleets and ruled ancient worlds, but their galaxy-spanning empire was fracturing, and they couldn't understand why. They had never considered that their greatest weakness wasn't military inferiority or technological backwardness. Their greatest weakness was that they had forgotten how to inspire loyalty instead of demanding obedience. And now it was too late to learn. The council chamber looked different now. Where once thousands of beings had sat in ordered rows, listening respectfully to their ancient leaders, empty seats created gaps like missing teeth. The great hall that had once hummed with the quiet efficiency of galactic government now echoed with angry voices and desperate arguments. Prime Velar stood at his podium, looking older than his 2,000 years. Around him, the remaining loyal species argued among themselves like children fighting over broken toys. The Sarian Empire demanded immediate military action. The Zephyran Defense Force wanted to negotiate with the rebels. The Hive Collective suggested simply ignoring the breakaway systems until they came crawling back. "Order, Belar," his voice cracking with strain. "We must have order." But order was the one thing the Council could no longer provide. In the 3 months since the Battle of Kepler, 43 species had declared independence. Entire sectors of space had withdrawn from Council authority. Trade routes that had operated for centuries were now controlled by the Free Systems Alliance. War Commander Zix slammed his fist on his speaking platform. "Every day we delay, more systems join the rebels. We must act now before it's too late. It's already too late," said Admiral CS, her crystal body dim with defeat. "Half our fleet has deserted to join their own species' independence movements. We can't fight a war with soldiers who no longer believe in our cause." The truth was worse than she admitted. Not only had individual ships defected to the Alliance, but entire battle groups had simply stopped following orders. The Council's military command structure, built on centuries of unquestioned authority, had collapsed the moment that authority was questioned. On the other side of the galaxy, Ambassador Jin Wu was preparing for his return to Nexus Prime. But this time, he wouldn't come as a supplicant seeking the Council's permission to exist. He would come as the representative of a new kind of galactic government, one built on choice rather than compulsion. The ship that carried him was surrounded by an escort fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human vessels flew alongside Mineral Confederacy destroyers, Outer Rim patrol boats, and ships from species so remote that most council members had never heard of them. It was a living symbol of what the galaxy could become when beings were free to choose their own allies. Major Sububin, Jin Wu's security chief, reviewed the tactical situation as they approached Nexus Prime. "The station's defenses are still formidable," she reported, "but intelligence suggests that many of the crews are more interested in avoiding conflict than fighting for the Council. That's what happens when you build a system on fear instead of loyalty," Jin Wu replied. Eventually, people stopped being afraid. Dr. Yunji, now serving as the Alliance's chief strategist, had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The sovereignty doctrine had evolved into something larger. A complete framework for galactic governance based on voluntary association and mutual benefit. The key, she explained to the Alliance representatives, is that we're not trying to replace the Council's empire with our own. We're trying to show the galaxy that empires are unnecessary. Delegate Yoon of the Mineral Confederacy nodded his rocky head in agreement. For too long, we've accepted that someone must rule and others must serve. The humans have shown us a different way. When Jinwoo's fleet arrived at Nexus Prime, they found a station in chaos. Council security forces were deserting in massive numbers. Entire species delegations were packing their belongings and preparing to leave. The great bureaucracy that had administered galactic law for 3 centuries was simply falling apart. Prime Velthar met Jinwoo in a much smaller chamber than before. Gone were the thousands of representatives and the formal ceremonies of state. Instead, a few dozen beings sat around a simple conference table, trying to salvage what they could from the wreckage of their government. Ambassador Jinwoo, Bethar said, his voice heavy with defeat. You've won. What do you want from us? Jinwoo took his seat across from the Catherian leader. Nothing, he said simply. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Balar's blue face twisted with confusion. Nothing. You've destroyed our empire, scattered our fleets, turned our own members against us, and you want nothing. We want you to leave us alone, Jinwoo clarified. We want the right to exist without your permission. We want the freedom to make our own choices and face our own consequences. That's all we've ever wanted. War Commander Zix leaned forward, his reptilian features twisted with anger. And if we refuse, if we choose to fight to the last ship to preserve galactic order, Jinwoo looked at the Saurian warrior with calm eyes. Then you'll lose, and a lot of beings will die for no good reason. Or you can choose to adapt to a galaxy where authority has to be earned instead of inherited. Dr. Yunji activated a holographic display showing the current state of galactic politics. Blue areas represented the old council territories. Red areas showed alliance systems. And there were new colors too. Green for independent systems that belonged to neither faction. Yellow for species that were forming their own regional governments. Look at what's happening, she said. For the first time in recorded history, beings are free to organize themselves however they want. Some are choosing democracy. Others prefer traditional monarchies. Some are experimenting with completely new forms of government, and it's working. Admiral Ka studied the display with professional interest. The trade routes are still functioning. There's been no increase in piracy or conflict. How is that possible without central authority? Because beings who choose to cooperate are more reliable than beings who are forced to cooperate. Jinwoo explained, when people work together because they want to, instead of because they have to, everyone benefits. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Representatives of the old council system struggled to understand a galaxy where their ancient authority was no longer relevant. Some, like Prime Velar, seemed genuinely confused by the idea that power could exist without hierarchy. But others began to see the possibilities. Representative flux of the energy being sparkled with new understanding. We've been so focused on maintaining order that we forgot why order mattered in the first place. Order should serve beings, not the other way around. Admiral Thex of the Aquarian Federation surprised everyone by announcing his species' withdrawal from Council military operations. My people are tired of fighting wars to preserve a system that benefits others more than ourselves, he declared. We choose to seek our own path. One by one, the remaining council members faced the same choice. They could cling to their ancient privileges and try to maintain their empire through force, or they could adapt to a galaxy where consent mattered more than conquest. The Catherian Empire chose to withdraw to their core worlds, bitter at losing their privileged position, but unwilling to fight a war they couldn't win. The Saurian military commanders returned to their home systems, where they would eventually discover that many of their own people welcomed the chance to choose their own government. But others made different choices. The Aquarian Federation negotiated new treaties with the Alliance, establishing relationships based on mutual benefit rather than hierarchy. The energy beings joined a coalition of species exploring new forms of distributed government. Even some of the crystal beings chose to experiment with democracy, despite having lived under monarchy for millennia. 6 months after Jinwoo's return to Nexus Prime, the galaxy looked completely different. The old council still existed, but as one government among many, rather than the supreme authority overall. Trade flowed along new routes established by voluntary agreements. Conflicts were resolved through negotiation between equals rather than dictate from above. Ambassador Jin Woo stood in the observation deck of Earth's new orbital headquarters, looking out at ships from dozens of species coming and going in peaceful cooperation. Beside him, Dr. Yoonji reviewed reports from across known space. The Rim territories have established their own defensive pact, she reported. The crystal beings are experimenting with direct neural democracy, and 3 species we'd never heard of have made contact, asking about membership in the alliance. Jin Woo nodded. Watching a mineral confederacy freighter dock alongside a human transport, did you ever imagine it would work this well? Honestly, Yoonji smiled. I thought we'd all be dead by now. I never expected that simply refusing to kneel would inspire so many others to stand up. The transformation hadn't been without problems. Some systems struggled with the transition to self-governance. A few regions experienced conflicts as old grievances surfaced without council authority to suppress them. But overall, the galaxy had discovered something remarkable. Beings were quite capable of organizing themselves when given the chance. The age of negotiation through strength had begun. Instead of ancient empires demanding obedience from their subjects, the galaxy now hosted hundreds of independent governments working together by choice. Trade agreements were negotiated between equals. Disputes were resolved through mediation rather than conquest. And at the center of it all, the simple principle that had started everything. Free beings had the right to determine their own destiny. Humanity hadn't conquered the stars through superior firepower or advanced technology. Establish humanity as supreme rulers of the galaxy. These terms are more than fair. They are generous. Yan Wu was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been bothering him since he first returned to the chamber. Why did we hold back? What? Quinn asked, confused. During the war, why did we fight with restraints? Why did we limit our weapons, our tactics, our full capabilities? Yan Wu looked directly at the High Arbiter. Can you answer that? Quinn thought carefully before speaking. Because you wanted to prove you were civilized. You wanted to show you could fight by our rules. Close, Han Wu said, but not quite right. We held back because we hoped you were better than us. The chamber was absolutely silent. Earth's history is soaked in blood, Hyan Wu continued. For thousands of years we fought each other over resources, territory, ideology, religion. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. We know what we're capable of when we remove all restraints. We know what total war looks like because we've practiced it on ourselves. He paused, letting his words sink in. When we reached the stars, we looked at the Galactic Council and saw what we hoped to become. Ancient civilizations working together, maintaining peace for thousands of years. We saw order, wisdom, justice. We wanted to be part of that. We wanted to prove we had evolved beyond our violent past. Counselor Malaris spoke up. You were testing us. Yes, Hyan Wu admitted. We restrained ourselves to see if you would respect restraint. We followed the rules of civilized warfare to see if those rules were honored. We offered fair peace terms to see if fairness mattered. And we failed your test, Quinn said quietly. Spectacularly, Hyan Wu agreed. You saw our mercy as weakness. You interpreted our restraint as inability. You assumed that because we were young, we must be primitive. And when we came to you seeking peace, you laughed in our faces. Captain Jiwan stepped forward slightly. You taught us a valuable lesson, High Arbiter. You taught us that the galaxy doesn't respect peace, it respects power. You taught us that mercy is seen as weakness unless backed by overwhelming force. You taught us that we can never let our guard down because the moment we do, someone will try to take advantage. So you showed us your true nature, Malara said. No, Han Wu corrected. We showed you what happens when you force us to stop hiding it. Humanity is capable of great compassion and great violence. We prefer compassion. We want peace. We want to build and explore and discover. But if you threaten us, if you mock us, if you try to destroy what we've built, then we will remind you why we survived 10,000 years of warfare on our home world. He pulled up a holographic display showing casualty figures from the Council fleet battle. 477 ships destroyed, 53,000 Council personnel killed. And you want to know the worst part? We could have destroyed all 500 ships. We had the weapons, the positioning, the capability. We let 23 ships escape specifically so they could report what happened. We let you survive so you could learn. President Nari's voice suddenly came through the chamber's communication system. She was broadcasting from Earth, her image appearing on every display. Hi, Arbiter Quinn. This is President Nari of the United Earth Government. I wanted to speak directly to the Council about humanity's future relationship with the galactic community. Please, Madam President, Quinn said respectfully. We don't want to be your enemies, Nari said. We don't want to rule you. We don't want to build an empire. What we want is respect. We want to be treated as equals. We want our restraint to be seen as strength, not weakness. Can you give us that? Quinn looked around the chamber at his fellow counselors. He saw fear in their eyes, yes, but also understanding. They had learned their lesson the hard way.